We continue our camp countdown preview with the quarterback position next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
I'm going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're out there on YouTube. And also rate that show 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. Just search for Unbearable Sports and you can find us anywhere. What's going on, Bears fans? This is the last offensive episode that we're going to be going through today as we continue our countdown to Bears training camp. It's getting closer and closer and closer, so it feels good. But with today, we're breaking down the quarterbacks. And if you haven't already, check out our other episodes. We go through every player on the offensive line, every player at the wide receiver position, tight end position, running back, you name it, we go through. But with today, we're going to be going down a couple, this will be a little bit different. I think we all want to know about Caleb Williams. We'll talk very lightly about Tyson Bagent and the others, but really we're going to be diving into Caleb Williams and talking about, first off, I have a huge thing of different advanced analytics that I want to break down for you about last year and also what we can kind of expect this year. Then at the very end, we'll talk about some over-unders and probably the least climactic did we get better at the very end. I think we all feel where we should be going with this at this whole position. So let's go and let's just start this off by talking about some of the roster changes. Nothing too crazy. Last year, we had Brett Rippon, but now we have Case Keenum. That's all you really got to know about this quarterback room. The biggest surprise, though, is, in my opinion, still was that we kept Austin Reed. Now, I think that that's at least a story going into this because now you have Ben Johnson. And is Austin Reed the undrafted rookie free agent that we had last season? Is he someone that's going to stay around? Is he someone that they see as an asset inside of this quarterback room? Because it still feels like you can have 3 quarterbacks in that room. Because remember last year, they got rid of Brett Rippon after the preseason. So they got rid of him, moved on from him. Went with Austin Reed over him. So now everyone talks about the quote unquote quarterback 2 battle. It's going to be Tyson Bagent with the Bears unless they wanted to trade him because somebody was offering something big for him. But it's going to be Caleb, Tyson, and most likely Case Keenum's going to be on the practice squad. Someone that is then more of a coach in that room is kind of the expectation. Obviously, the preseason and the regular season is a long ways away, but that's kind of the overall feeling. So Austin Reed, though, is still going to be somewhat of a story to be looking out for. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into Caleb Williams. And actually, before we get into Caleb Williams, there's one quarterback I want to talk about because last year we talked and broke down a little bit on Geno Smith, and that's why I want to talk a little bit about Jared Goff. And you'll hear a couple times that I just bring up Jared Goff because with Ben Johnson, it's a good indication of what he was doing last season. Now, Ben Johnson has claimed that this is a new offense, but still, you're going to get a lot of the same stuff that made Ben so successful. It's not just going to be an absolutely, completely new offense, but you're going to see a lot of things that worked with Jared Goff kind of get brought over. So if I bring up some Jared Goff stats, right now on YouTube, you can see his spray chart, so to speak, where exactly his passes went to. And something that I want to call out is you can see a lot of passes that happen directly in the middle of the field. So in the center of the field, between the numbers, we see 178 passes that go from 0 to 10 yards between the numbers. And also, if you tally all this stuff up, over 50% of the passes that Jared Goff threw last season and even the season before came between the numbers from behind the line of scrimmage out to 20 yards. So 20 plus yards, I didn't factor into that, but both. So 20 to behind the line of scrimmage, over 50% of the passes were between the numbers right there. So what's that saying? Well, last season, if we just flip over to Caleb Williams' numbers, so now the people on YouTube, you can see Caleb's numbers. When you look at this, if you want to do the quick math, Caleb Williams was just a little bit over a third I think it was like 36% or 37%, but just over a third of his passes went in that same range. So the big reason why I wanted to call this out is something that you just see with Ben Johnson. Like with Shanahan and others, they talk about if you can operate in the middle of the field, that's the money spot. That's because it's very difficult for defenders, if you think about it, to defend in the middle of the field because there's no sideline. So it's a huge advantage, but it can be difficult for a quarterback because there can be many things going on. So if you can dissect it easily, you can throw it in the middle of the field more. Caleb, a little over a third of his passes went in the middle of the field. But also another thing I want to bring up, and these are actually his numbers that I had from our last year's quarterback preview show. When he was at USC, he threw it for over 50% in that same range. So that behind the line of scrimmage, out to 20 yards in the middle of the field, between the numbers, over 50% of his passes went there. So I just want to kind of further this point that when Caleb was coming out, I mentioned this before, that he is someone that could throw it in the middle of the field. But last year, for those that would do a lot of the film breakdowns with us, we had our patent pending puddle offense that we called with Shane Waldron, where there's a lot of just passes out to the outside inside of that system. So that makes a lot of sense as to why a lot of Waldron's passes were going to the outside, looking to the out, not really stressing the middle of the field. Underneath Ben Johnson, expect that middle of the field to be stressed more, especially since you're going to have most likely two tight ends out there. And Ben Johnson is someone that likes to get that slot receiver involved. And yet again, like we said, the middle of the field can be if you can pick apart that middle of the field, it can be very, very dangerous. Now, some of those that are looking at the numbers, you might see 6 interceptions for Jared Goff, or a total of, let's see, do the quick math, 11 total interceptions or 12 total between the numbers, while only having 3 outside of that. But yeah, that's where there's some danger in the middle, but also you can take advantage of that as well. So expect that. That's one of the things I just wanted to call out with Jared Goff, is that Jared Goff had a lot more in the middle types of passes. The other piece too, we'll bring this up a little bit more. Jared Goff had 35.7% of his dropbacks in play action. Now, the reason why that's important is because at 35.7% of snaps as play action is, I believe, the second most. Let me just look at this real quick. Like I said, I have a huge list of data points that I grabbed for this. But yes, that is second out of 44 qualifying quarterbacks. And Caleb, for those that are curious, Caleb Williams, on the other hand, only had play action 17.4% of snaps. Now, you might say because the offensive line and other things like that, we'll be getting into that a little bit later, but that can be one of the effects. Caleb Williams was 41st out of 44 qualifying quarterbacks with play action snaps. Now, a big reason why play action is also so important is because play action is seen as an advantage for a lot of the quarterbacks, because if you have a good running game, which we did not have, but if you're able to get linebackers and other people moving with play action, it can lead to an easier pass for your quarterback. So that's why typically people see play action as a very successful pass, because typically when people are running play action, and I don't have the actual stat. Like I said, I have lots of other stats, but Caleb had a positive completion percentage and positive yards per pass, I believe, when he was running play action versus not play action. So it's just one of those things where, yes, you can expect a little bit more play action. Like we all kind of know, they're going to be trying to run the football a lot more than they were before. And hopefully then that opens up some of the play action. The other piece too is with screens, because Caleb Williams threw the second highest percentage of screens at 15.8%, but also Jared Goff was number 16, which was 11.3%. So not a huge difference when you look at it from 15.8% with Caleb Williams and 11.3% of the passes with Jared Goff. It's not like they don't do screens at all over with Detroit. So even with an experienced quarterback like Jared Goff, there was still a good handful of screens over 1/10 of the plays being said screens. So we're not going to completely remove the screen game, but hopefully it's less obvious than what we were running with a Shane Waldron. So that was the main stuff that I really wanted to cover from the Jared Goff perspective, just because you can kind of see where some of his passes are landing. Like I said, the big story is it's between the numbers. That's really where these passes are going. Over 50% of those passes in both of Ben Johnson's offensive coordinator years going between the numbers. So now, but wait, there's more, because there's more Caleb Williams stats that are out there as well that I wanted to just bring up as we go through this. So some ESPN analytics that I wanted to break down for you all, just to kind of throw these numbers out here. ESPN Analytics, not a big fan of what Caleb did last season. They had him number 28 out of 32 in QBR, 20 out of 32 in EPA, 32 for 32 for EPA in sacks. So saying that sacks did not factor in well to the Bears' overall win performance, but was 14th in run EPA, expected points added, and then also 21st in passing EPA. But in NFL Next Gen Stats, they have him as the worst quarterback in EPA. So take that with a grain of salt. Yet again, it's just those overall. But going down this as well, a little bit more about Caleb last year. Next Gen Stats had him as 9th highest time to throw at 2.92 seconds, and PFF had him 6th at 3.04. So what do we know? He holds on to the ball. That is something that we talked about too. He was holding on to the ball too long in college. That was one of the questions coming out. Still was holding the ball fairly long here as well. So you're hoping that with the new offense that he's able to get the ball out. Still not anywhere near the numbers that we had with Justin Fields with holding onto the ball as well. So just so people know. The other thing too, his completion air yards was 10th shortest at 4.6. So yet again, kind of completing some of those shorter passes. You can kind of see it in the spray chart. When he was trying to throw it deep, we just did not see a lot of success. He actually had the third lowest out of 41 qualifying quarterbacks PFF grade when throwing deep, so 20 plus yards. And it makes sense. When you look at this, throwing deep, he had a total of 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. 5 of his 6 interceptions were deep. Some of those were, in fact, throwaways that just did not work. But you look at it, outside left was 6 of 27. Between the numbers deep was 6 of 18. And outside right, 8 of 30. And if you go back to his college numbers, he wasn't great outside right, going 5 for 19. And then if you go between the numbers, he was 15 of 18 plus 20 yards. And then outside left, 14 of 29. This is actually one of the biggest questions that I have. And one of the biggest concerns that I have going into this year is you're already hearing a lot from people that are attending minicamp and attending the OTAs that are saying things like, listen, the deep ball still ain't there. Like, yeah, there's a couple of those big passes, but that's something that I really want to look at when we go to training camp. And when I'm seeing it myself, I am very curious about this deep ball because that is something we just did not see. And when we were watching the games and, watching the All-22, we were looking at this going, hopefully there's something wrong. Because if he's actually trying to pass it to some of these people, it's not even close. And I think that's the thing with these deep passes. They just weren't even close. And that's my biggest concern with it is the outside right, outside left, those never look good. Between the numbers, he does seem a lot better at that deep ball. But like I was saying too, the advanced metrics also back that up. He also had the 6th worst adjusted completion percentage over the middle. Past 20 yards, which, as we're discussing, probably does not surprise anybody out there as we're kind of talking about this as a whole. So, yeah. So then also too, one other thing that I want to bring up with Caleb Williams with his completion percentage. At the end of the year, Next Gen Stats had him at a completion percentage over expected at negative 1.4, which you might say, hey, that's negative. That's not great. Well, yeah, technically it is below average because it's basically the completion percentage that they thought he should have had, right? They said that, hey, he should have made a couple more passes. But the thing I want to call out is we charted this so well throughout the season, and you really did see a progression when it came to this completion percentage with Caleb Williams over the weeks. So yes, at the end of the year, it was negative, but it got better and better throughout the year. And even the EPA stuff, it got better and better throughout the season as well. So all the next gen stats started liking Caleb more and more and more the more that he played, which I'll get that. I will take that any day. But let's get back to the spray chart because I want to just talk about the other areas of the field as well. Just so that we know, his intermediate, so 10 to 19 yards. PFF gave him like a mid grade at that area. Also, he had the ninth worst adjusted completion percentage out of 43 qualifying quarterbacks. Also at short, so 0 to 9, this is where he shined, you know? So, hey, he was one of the better ones out there with the 0 to 9 yards. So very quick, accurate types of passes. He had the 8th best PFF grade out of 43 qualifying quarterbacks and 7th highest adjusted completion percentage. So some of you might be saying, some negative, pessimistic people might be saying, yeah, it's 0 to 9. He's a check down champion. Well, yeah, he actually threw it very, very well at that 0 to 9 yards. I'm fine with that. Like I said, it's those deeper passes I have more questions about because we see the arm talent. He has that arm talent to put it wherever it should go. But when he's sitting down in the pocket and he's trying to do stuff like that, just not seeing that ball be put in the right spots past that 20 yards and, middle of the road at the intermediate. I'll take that, but you want to see the jumps. If you want to see what he can do, it's those deeper passes, getting more on target with those. And behind the line of scrimmage, just so people know, yeah, the difference between it all is so minuscule. So you can't really take too much away with it. He basically graded out smack dab in the middle, just kind of like an average grade and top 10 in adjusted completion for behind the line of scrimmage. But yet again, very, very minuscule. So no victory laps out there as well. So that's kind of the whole spray chart. I got more because I want to talk. We just broke down the offensive line, and I talked about this with the offensive line because when we would watch Caleb Williams, there were so many things going on. And I've said this so many times on this show before. Every time that we would break down the tape, the number one question I would usually get if someone was joining late or anything like that was, well, hey, who are we blaming, right? Who's at fault? Why was he getting sacked? And I always had like the same reaction. It was everything. It was absolutely everything. When we would break it down, it wasn't just Braxton Jones. It wasn't just Tevin Jenkins or when Nate Davis was out there. Nate Davis was awful. It wasn't just Coleman Shelton. It just wasn't Darnell Wright. It wasn't just Cole Kmet. It wasn't just Caleb Williams. It was the whole thing. And that's why when we talk about this Bears team, the coaching piece, when everything is kind of bad, it's either you have bad players, which I don't think we have awful players, right? I don't think we have awful players, but it's either bad players or bad coaching. And that's where you hear all the craziness with what was going on with the coaching. And the reason why I bring this up is because the numbers that we see about pressures also echo that same sentiment. Because yet again, Caleb was sacked a lot of times. And one of the numbers that PFF actually charts is quarterback pressures and what pressures the quarterback was accounted for. So I don't have all the numbers in front of you people out there on YouTube, but I do have them written down on my notes. And I did grab this little screenshot at the very bottom just so you can kind of see where he kind of ranked. So we'll work through these numbers. So last season, Caleb Williams, when it came down to number of pressures, he was actually the 6th most pressured quarterback according to PFF stats. And with this, he was 18th though out of 42 qualifying quarterbacks, with being pressured on 35% of his dropbacks. So that's a key number right there. So he was only pressured on 35% of his snaps, which was the 18th highest out of 42 quarterbacks. You heard that right. He wasn't one of the top ones in being pressured. It was just, or he wasn't one of the top ones with average number of dropbacks that he had. But when you tally everything up together, he was 6th in the most pressures at 203. But how many pressures did he account for? Well, he accounted for 30. PFF charts him with 38 pressures, or saying that he was at fault for 38 of these pressures. And as we go through this, the 38 total pressures that he had was actually the 4th most that they blame a quarterback for. And I believe Patrick Mahomes was actually number 1. So just to throw that out there from that perspective, he was the number 1 quarterback that they gave the most sacks to, saying that he accounted for 17 sacks by just not getting rid of the football. And also he was middle of the road with hits at least. So they only charted 3 hits that they gave that, hey, it was Caleb's fault that he got hit. Only 3 and was right in the middle of the road. So not bad at all. But from a hurries perspective, they gave him the 4th highest at 18. So really they're just saying, hey, you're kind of at fault with some of these pressures. But yet again, they charted him with the 4th most quarterback faults for pressures at that number 38. But let's talk a little bit more about this. So even then, Caleb had a lot of dropbacks last season because we were down in a lot of these games. And a couple of the other things that I want to call out as well, he was tied for the 2nd highest time to throw when he was under pressure. So, meaning he was probably holding onto the football. And this goes back to the other piece too. It's not all on Caleb either. It's on the line. It's on the receivers too. There's many times that we were looking at a play and we were like, what's the design of this play? Like, how was this supposed to even work? That strike against Shane Waldron. Then the wide receivers. Many times, sometimes the wide receivers just did not get open, just did not run clean routes. That's just how the team was. So yeah, so sometimes he was holding the ball for that. Sometimes he should have thrown it to the first read. Yet again, everyone gets blamed. Everyone gets blamed for what was happening last season. And last year, he was actually average when it came down to time to throw when he was clean. So 2.42 seconds when he was clean to then throw the ball. So that was about middle of the road, 23rd out of 43 qualifying quarterbacks. So what I want to talk about with that is it just shows that, hey, some of these pressures are on him with just holding the football a little bit long, but when he's clean, he's getting the ball out, right? And that's the big piece. Also though, when he was clean, he was actually had the 11th worst PFF grade, and he was mid in pressure. He was middle of the road when he was actually pressured. So pretty darn good when he was actually pressured, and also below average quarterback rating and completion percentage when kept clean. So yes, even though he's getting the ball out, there's still some improvement when he's kept clean. And I think that's part of it, right? Run the system, run the Ben Johnson system, but also the accuracy downfield is stuff that we're going to be needing to look into a little bit more. And the last little bit, when we get into this as well, Caleb Williams, speaking of pressure, was blitzed. He had let me just see this. When he was blitzed, he had the 4th lowest turnover worthy percentage, which was phenomenal. So obviously did not turn the ball over or had a very, very low turnover worthy play when he was blitzed. So very disciplined against the blitz, but also he had the 17th highest grade when blitzed, which was number 2 among rookies, Jaden Daniels being number 1. But still very, very good under the blitz from Caleb Williams. But also he might have had the 11th worst completion percentage when blitzed. But like I said, all the advanced metrics saying he still was making good decisions with the football when he was getting blitzed. When not blitzed, he actually was 38th of 42 quarterbacks among PFF grade when not blitzed. And the last little bit too, just to kind of wrap up all the advanced metrics. Like I said, I'm just bombarding you all with numbers and metrics, and then we'll kind of put a little pretty bow on this. But the last little bit is just the pressures that you fault. And yet again, like I've said, blame goes all over the place. And that's exactly what we see, because 76.4% of the pressures that were allowed or that happened they blame the offensive line, which, believe it or not, was the 12th best among 43 qualifying quarterbacks. So, just to put that into perspective, right? They're saying that the offensive line was the 12th best at not giving up pressure, or like with the percentage of pressure. So it's the percentage of pressures that are spread out. I want to just make that clear. And what that means to me is it just furthers the point that everybody was at fault. Because even when you go through where those pressures specifically fell. So for those that are actually seeing the numbers on my screen right now that are out there on YouTube, it doesn't mean that 25% of the time the left tackle was creating pressure, was giving up pressure. It just means the left tackle was accounted for 25% of the pressures that the offensive line was accounted for. So what this all means, if you look at it all together, it just means that like the entire team stunk together. Because when you go through each individual position, the inline tight ends technically gave the 10th worst percentage of pressures allowed. Yet again, these are inline tight ends blocking, but it was only accounted for 3.9% of the actual pressures given up. Then when you go to the left tackle, it was 13th worst out of 43 qualifying, at the, quarterbacks at that position. So yet again, not great, but when you go through each one, when I was sorting, you just saw that the Bears were usually kind of outside of that top 10, kind of in that middle range. Yet again, just to put a bow on this, last year was gross, right? As we all know, last year was gross. And where this blame goes, Caleb deserves blame for what was going on, but everyone deserves blame for what was going on. The wide receivers weren't getting open. The offensive line was making bad blocks, and Caleb was trying his best to do what he can, but he has a lot of growth. So what are we going to see out of Caleb Williams this year? Like I said, you're going to see a lot of play action. You're going to still see a good handful of screens. You're going to be seeing some of these easy gimme type of plays, a lot of motion out of tight ends so that they can have simple passes that can kind of go out to it. So yet again, going back to Caleb running a system, you have so many weapons. Get the ball inside of their hands so that you don't have to be doing a lot of this work on yourself. And we saw this with Caleb. You can feel that he didn't really want to run, but he had to, because he had to do something to try and make the team better. So really with this, I'm excited to see Caleb in this system because he still has the talent, but really the stuff, look for that deep ball, and then also just see how he can work within the system to get some of those plays that Ben Johnson is just going to be drawing up for him. So that's a lot on Caleb Williams. We're already a half an hour into this show. Let's just kind of do some rapid fire with some of these quarterbacks. So Tyson Bagent, a little bit on him. All signs point to that he's going to be the backup. Still very talented. The only reason why I could see them moving on, it would only be from within a trade perspective. Tyson's talented. Tyson's a good backup quarterback, and you have him still on a rookie deal, and after this season, he can be a restricted free agent. It doesn't make sense for the Bears to just cut him because what he's put on tape and what he's been able to do. So that's why I just think it's a little crazy when people are like, oh, is he going to get cut for Case Keenum? I'd be shocked. I'd be stunned. It would be bad business for the Bears to do something like that with Tyson Bagent. But still, he's a fun player to watch. I'm very excited to see him out there on the preseason field. So that I just can't wait to see some Bears football out there. But then next, Case Keenum, like we've talked about before, big time veteran. And the biggest thing is that he's helping Caleb with film, with going through the plays, going through the playbook, with any questions, because coaches can only be around the players for so long because of the Players Association's rules. So because of this, a way to kind of skirt around that, Case Keenum comes in. He can help coach up Caleb Williams as they navigate this offseason period of time. So love having Case Keenum around. They're going to probably keep him around. That's why I was saying most likely a practice squad player, unless they feel like they need to keep him on the roster, which yet again, I think that he's going to be more so a practice squad player. Which leads me to Austin Reed. I just don't see it. I had talked about it with Austin Reed before. Seems like a fun dude. Seems like an awesome guy. Really, that's what was so cool and fun to watch with like the Hard Knocks and everything. I was still shocked that he made it on the team. He performed well and seemed to be someone that they all kind of got along with. But at the same time, this is a business, and Case Keenum brings the knowledge. And if you had to have one of those players on your practice squad, give me the veteran that has been helping Caleb Williams get coached up and helping Caleb learn in this league. And it just seems like Case has been really doing that. So that's why, to me, I'd be shocked if Austin makes the team again. But a little bit on him. He was someone that really did not pass the ball past 5 yards in college. He was asked to do a lot of short stuff in college, but in the NFL was able to do a little bit more than 5 yards. But he's very that short type of passer that's out there. So let's get into some over-unders, because that's kind of the main roster right now. So the over-unders, if we flip this on over, I want to talk about this because first off, and for those out there on YouTube, please let me know what you think. So these are the numbers for Caleb Williams. So for passing yards, I have set the bar at 4,000. So last year I had it at 3,500, and I believe I said over for that, which he in fact went over. So are we going to have our first 4,000 yard passer as a quarterback? I say no. I say no because I feel we're going to be running the football a lot, and that's why I think we're not going to be getting over those 4,000 yards. If we do, that'd be amazing. Because if you look at it too, only 6 quarterbacks did it last year. It's not an easy number that half the quarterbacks do in the league. It is a number that only 6 quarterbacks did last season. That was Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, and Lamar Jackson. So only 6, right? But it's still possible. There's no offense to Sam Darnold and Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, but they made it. So, they found their homes, but that's where you see the scheme, the system, the amount of throws that you are making can affect that. So Caleb did very well his rookie season. He can still get close. I think he gets close to it, but I'm going under for that. If you say over, let me know down in the comments. So now, passing touchdowns, 23.5. So last season, only 11 had more than 24 touchdown passes last year. Caleb last year had 20. I'm going to say over because I think that this offense scores more. I mean, we better score more. And he has shown that he's able to make these touchdown passes. I think it's going to be over. That is something that Goff was able to do very successfully. I think you're going to see some of those passes happen this season. Now, yes, they would run it in with David Montgomery a lot and also with a Williams a lot as well with Ben Johnson's time at the Lions. But I'm going to say over. It's going to be really close. I think that 24 number is right on that line. And next, interceptions, because Caleb had 6 interceptions last season. So I put the line at 6.5. And I'm going to say it's over. In a good way, right? I know that there's a lot of talk out there that he needs to be more aggressive. He needs to try and make some of these passes. And I think it's going to be over. 6 is a very, very low number. I know he idolizes Aaron Rodgers as a passer, and that was something that Aaron Rodgers, he did not throw interceptions. I think that Caleb is going to go over that 6 number, maybe 8, right? Types of interceptions out there. If he's below this, then kudos. then absolute kudos goes out to him. And last but not least, rushing yards at 400. Last season, he had over 450 rushing yards. And I'm going to say under. I think it's going to be right around 400. Heck, it might even be like 410. But I want to just kind of keep pushing this point that yes, Caleb can run, but still, I think that Ben Johnson does not want his franchise quarterback to be running the football. And yet again, like I said before, Caleb seemed like he was running because he felt like he had to do something. Like he had to kind of put the team on his back, do something big with it. And I think that's the reason why he was running the football. It was only when he had to. That's why I think you're going to see less. And yet again, like we've talked about, he ran for the most rushing yards that he has in his career last season. He ran less in college than he did in the pros. So I expect him to kind of go back to that and not run as much. I think it's going to be under. I think he's going to be right around that, but I'm going to say under the 400 rushing yards just for the sake of it. So now, the last but not least, did we get better? Now, I think when you look at, when you truly do look at the quarterbacks, we went from Brett Rippon to Case Keenum. I like all signs point to Case Keenum being a great coach in the locker room. Austin Reed is going to keep being Austin Reed. Tyson Bagent has this long flowy lock, so you know what? Kudos goes out to him. But it all goes down to Caleb Williams, and I think this is where we all know the answer to this question. This position has gotten better because, for one, I do think that having the veteran like Case Keenum in the room is great, and having Ben Johnson and a coach that cares about him is a better room. And you should expect Caleb to progress. If he doesn't, I think then it's a bigger question on what the Bears do this offseason. It might sound like a bold take, but it all goes down to Ben. It all goes down to Ben and Caleb's relationship this season. And that is the biggest thing. That is the biggest thing. How do Ben and Caleb work together? And that's something I'm excited about. And that's why we're counting down to camp and giving you all the Bears covers that you need as we break down all the different players as we count down to camp. So if you like content and want more content like this, make sure to hit that like button. If you're out there on YouTube, it helps out the show tremendously. Leave a comment. If you love this show, let me know that you love the show. And also, you can download the podcast everywhere that you get your podcast. Just search for Unbearable Sports. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.